The problem with recreating old computer setups is that you can usually get a hold of the components for the computer and put them all together, which is all well and good. But then what do you do about the desks they were originally on? A lot of the desks from the 80s and 90s generally were ready to assemble furniture. They didn't typically hold up very well. So what do you do about a desk that isn't available anymore? Well, I had a desk that was a ready to assemble piece of furniture that my Commodore sat on. And from my very first memory of that very first Commodore, it survived many, many, many moves before it did finally fall apart. However, this particular desk was basically made out of shelves. And the only picture I've been able to find of it is a partial picture. Fortunately, I've had a lot of experience with this desk, and I'm going to recreate it today and show you how I did it. I'm Mr. Gigabytes, and this is Gigabytes Technology. I don't know if I'm in shot or not, but I'm going to explain what I'm doing here, because this is definitely not the right way to do this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these furniture nuts and screws to bolt the legs onto the uprights. And in order to get all the holes to line up properly, I basically took the two legs, and so that basically the side that's going to face the uprights, kind of like the way it is here, are together. So that when I drill through, all I have to do is move this leg down to this upright, and the holes should all line up. And likewise, this one should go to this leg, and so all the holes should line up in case I mismeasured or have something a little bit off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm using a bit that should be the right size for the furniture nut, and I've marked them where each of the holes should go. I measured in about 2 inches, so basically 2 inches from all sides. 2 here, 2 here, so there'll be 4 bolts. I don't believe the original desk came with, did 4 bolts. We're going to do 4 bolts because it's got to support, it has to support all the weight above just on these 2 legs. So 4 bolts. And there we go. Okay, so I'm basically doing the same thing for the desk part. The difference is the desk part, it comes back a 3/4 of an inch, which is the width of the piece. It comes back 3/4 of an inch, basically to butt up against the back, one of the back pieces, and it also overhangs by 2 inches in order to support the shelf unit. So we're going to start with these two, and I'll measure off from these two. Again, we're going in, so up to over 2 from this edge, and this one is up to and over 2 3/4. This hole actually aligns up with our hole down here. So these should actually be in alignment. So let's go ahead and drill those. Actually, I'm going to start with the one back here because I've got double marks here. I don't want to forget exactly where to drill. So we may have had a little bit of movement. That's why this clamping method isn't ideal. We didn't have a lot of movement, so I think I can deal with that. I'm just going to run this through one more time. Yeah, it went straight through that time. Just a little bit of cleaning up. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so these nuts, these furniture nuts are they just pound in. This is the inside of the upright. They just pound in like so. These add quite a bit of structure to like particle board pieces like this. So inside of the leg, inside of the top of the upright, we got to do the same thing. We'll get 4 more these nuts. The original didn't use these furniture nuts that I can remember. So now we'll just flip this over. And it looks like all these screw holes will line up, so that's good. Now, just doing this, I actually don't reach the nut. These are 1-inch screws. So what I have to do is we'll have to make a little countersink. So we're just going to make some countersinks real quick. I just got to do that on the other side and this upright here. There we go. Okay, let me bring you up to speed because a lot of things have happened and I almost forgot to record this next part. What happened was I needed to cut 6 inches off the uprights, which, if we're keeping score, that is a total of 4 cuts we're going to have to make to the shelving. I had to cut 6 inches off of the 3-foot uprights to make them 2.5 feet. Otherwise, we were going to end up with a standing desk. And there's nothing wrong with a standing desk. It's just that's not what this desk is supposed to be. So I cut that off and I re-drilled the holes and everything's fine again. But now I'm to the point where I've got to get a back on so that I can start doing the top. The old desk had screw holes here and here, and then there was a line of screw holes here to sort of when the top went on. Well, the top that I have is about 1/2 inch. I would have used a thicker top, but I didn't, and that's where we're at. So I'm going to work with what I have. And in fact, the top that I have is going to have to be cut to length. If you get a top, they typically only come in 4-foot lengths, and so you would have to cut a foot off of the edge of that top in order to fit it into the 3-foot width of this desk. So that's one cut. You have to cut a 2-foot shelf in half to get the 1-foot uprights for the top shelf. So that's 2 cuts. And then you have to cut 6 inches off of each of the 3-foot shelves, 3-foot uprights, because they don't sell 2.5-foot shelves. So that's a total of 4 cuts. So if you're doing this on your own, that's what you'll have to do. I'm going to try sort of balance this on here. It's close. That's almost a desk. Now I got to custom cut the top. Okay, so I wasn't going to film this part, but if you're doing this on your own, hopefully you'll have a lot fewer spider webs than I got. This actually ends up being 2 feet by 4 feet, which is exactly what you would get at your local lumber yard. I'm going to cut a foot off of the end of this. Now this is just an unfinished edge all the way around. So it really doesn't matter which side I want to take off. So I want 3 foot here. So normally when you get a piece like that, it's 23 3/4 inches. Take off just an inch. There we go. That's about where we want to be. Just a little bit inside. I'll hold it in place while I secure it. Up onto the upright. Okay, so originally I was going to get real fancy, and I was going to bolt this upright together. I think I'm just going to screw the whole thing together. It just needs to go into place. Now what I'm using is about 1-inch screws. Honestly, maybe this whole thing was just screwed together, now that I think about it. In the original desk, this was, round about here. That always annoyed me when I used it. You only had so much room. And with the Commodore, it was fine. And even with my 486 that I had, it was all right. In later years, I ended up putting a shelf across the top to widen it a little bit to get more stuff on top of it. So I figure in this design, we're just gonna go right across the top. I think for the top, I'm gonna pre-drill a couple of holes. I'm gonna secure this side first. Honestly, this is sort of how my Harbor Freight workbench goes together, the top of it. Just one more piece to put on, then I think we're done. Okay, so there it is, all finished off. The last piece that I needed to put on was down there. It's basically a stabilizing bar. On the old one, it was basically right in the middle of the shelf, which, I guess is fine. So I put it all the way back. I was forever kicking it when I used this desk, so I put it further back on this one. In order to do it the way that I did, I in the original plans that I had, I was just going to screw that onto the back. But what I did instead is I trimmed off about 1.5 inches off the end of the shelf and mounted it inside the legs. It actually provides more side-to-side stability that way. The desk is pretty solid as it is, but that's definitely an option to give you a little more stability. So 5 cuts with a circular saw to get everything trimmed down to the way you want it. I'll have some final plans, a link to the final plans at the in the description of the video. But yeah, there it is. The only thing left to do is to set it up with all the Commodore stuff and see how it looks. Well, I'm not exactly Norm Abrams, and this isn't exactly the new Yankee Workshop. But we did get it done, and I did get it moved into the office here. Coincidentally, a couple of notes. Number one, I think the desk is about 6 inches wider and 6 inches deeper than the original desk was. So I believe it's 6 inches shorter this way and 6 inches shorter this way. When I put all of the equipment onto the desk, just didn't feel right. The old desk was a lot more crowded, so I think everything was about 2.5 feet, in particular the top, which means that if you want to build something that's closer to the original desk, you would have to take 6 inches off of these limbs. You'd have to take 6 inches off the top and 6 inches off the short side of the desk as well. And that would get you about where you need to be. Not to mention you would have to take 6 inches off of each of the 3-foot pieces along the back in order for it to fit properly. But I like this size a lot better. It feels It feels kind of a retro modern. But the other thing I didn't do is, of course, I didn't finish off this edge. It's just the particle board. But of course, the original desk had a wood grain finish to it. I may do that in the future. I'm kind of feeling like I want to swap this top out for something a little thicker, and maybe with a bullnose on it. I can actually go get a 4-foot by 23.25 panel and just kind of slide it in. I would just have to take the top off a little bit. I'd be able to slide it in. I'd have a thicker top. It wouldn't have as much give. But this isn't too bad either. The other thing I didn't do is I didn't put this decorative face along the front. Not only did I not have the piece, but when I used the old desk, I remember that thing being always seeming like it was in the way. I was always hitting it with a chair or, in particular, office chairs. And I like this being a little more open and to be able to scoot a little further underneath the desk. Or what I might do is I might build a keyboard drawer that goes all the way across that you can pull out. I think that would be a fun project to do. There will be upgrades to this desk in the future. I'm just not sure when. I kind of like the 3-foot width rather than the 2.5. Like I said, doesn't feel as crowded. And I'm going to be using it as my desk behind me, so you'll see this in future videos in the background, I'm sure. So I made several mistakes on this piece. It's not pretty or glamorous or anything like that. It's just kind of bodged together. I came to realize that the original desk didn't have all of the I didn't use the T-nuts on the original. There was no T-nuts on the original desk. I used T-nuts on the feet because it's load bearing, and the top up here because it is nice to be able to unscrew the top of the desk and lift it off and to be able to move it. That's how I was able to get it in here, quite frankly. And I was able to do it by myself. I simply lifted the top off and set it down, moved the legs in, and then set the top back on, screwed everything back together. So if you don't have to get you don't have to get quite as fancy as I did. Not that I got that fancy. These two screws here, those are very advantageous to have as, to be able to use the T-nuts and the bolts like I did, to be able to sort of screw it and unscrew it repeatedly to sort of take it apart, lift it off, and be able to move it much easier than it would take to move the entire desk as a unit. So all the mistakes, the one thing that this desk is really good about is all the mistakes are more or less hidden. Every time I didn't do something right, basically it was on a side that was not going to be visible anyway, or it's along the sides or the back or what have you. But this is generally how it gets put together. People who do woodworking will have an easier time putting this together than I did with my definite lack of skills. But I did manage to get it together. This could all be put together with 1-inch long construction screws, which is what I used on most of the unit. I just used the bolts and the bolts and the T-nuts. I call them furniture nuts in just those 6 places on each side. And I really didn't have to do that. I could have just screwed the whole thing together and it would have worked just fine. This piece that would go across here, that was actually done with a couple of plastic brackets on the original desk. So it's up to you whether you want to tackle this yourself. Speaking of tackling it yourself, we are going to try and get a manufacturer to custom cut the pieces in order to put together kits so that you can do this yourself. And it will only require a screwdriver rather than a screwdriver, a circular saw, a power drill, hammer. So hopefully we can get kits out so that anybody can put one of these together themselves. And this was a real desk that existed in the real 80s, in the time that a lot of these retro computers were available. It's a very simple desk to put together, and the parts are available at just about any hardware store. Now, in terms of cost, this originally cost me about $60 to buy all the parts. In today's money, it would cost approximately $80 to $85 in order to buy all the shelving and the hardware to put it all together. Not bad for a desk, but certainly a lot more than we bought it for back in the 80s. That's all for the moment. We'll see you in the next video.